So, this joke does not apply to any pastor that you and I know, but a pastor got pulled over by the police, and the officer smelled a little alcohol. So he asked, "Have you been drinking?" "No, officer, only water," the pastor said. "Really? Then why do I smell the strong aroma of wine?" The pastor looked up to the sky and said, "Lord, you did it again." This is a sermon on how to avoid judging your pastor and everybody else. So we're going to look at 3 examples in our notes. St. Patrick, Jesus, 2 really good examples, right? And then you. You and I are good examples of how not to judge. In each section, I'm going to try to share a blessing from the Bible because, and here's the secret. Jesus said the only way we can avoid judging, that is, being critical, speaking ill of other people, is to bless them instead, to speak good about them, to do good. That is, the only way we can stop doing something harmful is to replace it, to fill it in with something good. My mama used to say, and you can finish this, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. That's right. Teddy Roosevelt's daughter used to have a pillow embroidered, and it said, "If you don't have anything to say, good to say about anybody, come sit near me." President Roosevelt also said when the press complained about young Alice, he said, "Listen, I can either run the country or I can control Alice, but I can't do both." If you hear something or see something that people do wrong, if it is bad for them to do it or say it or to be it, then it is bad for us to repeat it. I have a motto that I generally don't buy from a salesman who badmouths his competition, because there's something about it that inside of me just doesn't seem right. Judging is bad. That's coming from Jesus. And right along, in my opinion, with fear, worry, we heard worry today too, lying, doubt, unforgiveness, these have to be some of the top 10 sins in the Bible. Now, didn't I just judge by picking which sins and who? Okay. Now, in the Bible, in the Greek language, there are many, and I'm not going to get into the language, but there are many different words for judging. It's like, they say I don't know if this is true, but they say the Eskimos have different words for snow. There's the light fluffy snow, there's the small drizzly snow. Whatever kind of snow we had that covered my car completely in ice this week, right after I had been running around in shorts the day before. So there are different words for snow. Like, you're in the grocery store. This is a bad example because I judge all fruit in the grocery store to be bad right now. But you pick up fruit and you look at it and you judge whether it's good fruit or bad fruit. You see a guy running down the street and mugging a lady and grabbing her purse, you judge that that's a crime and it's wrong. Well, those are 2 separate words in the Bible. And a third word in the Bible is the word that Jesus uses here today, "Thou shalt not judge," or "do not judge." This week, the Farm Bureau's Women's Committee put on the Ag Fair. And one of the teachers I saw in the paper, she said that the Ag Fair is the best kept secret in Bureau County. They brought 350 of our kids in from 19 classes, and they showed them 14 different stations of what to do. They were teaching kids to judge. What's a good cow? How do things work? They were giving them those skills to test the fruit. Like all of our grandmothers taught us how to thump the watermelons, right? Squeeze the cantaloupes, all that. You have to learn that skill of judging. You also have to learn to judge bad behavior, criminal behavior. Drinking and driving. Generally frowned upon. What they say, don't drink and drive. You might spill your drink. That was a joke, see. There is a problem that I've noticed called binge drinking. The CDC came out with a study. We've got a few people in our society that are guzzling 17 billion drinks a year. They average 470 binge drinks a year just by themselves. I don't know if you can do the math on that, but that's like 10 binge drinks a week. So there's some people that are really... And we have to be able to see that because we can't help people. A friend of mine told me people don't like statistics. I assured them you love statistics. So what is binge drinking? It's where a guy drinks 5 drinks or more, or a lady drinks 4 drinks or more in 4 or 5 hours. Their blood alcohol goes over, 0.08 in Illinois. There's a level. You can get impairment driving with 0.05, but if you get caught drinking and driving after you've binge drinked and your blood is high, you can lose your license for a year. You can go to jail for a year. You can have to pay a fine of thousands of dollars. The whole thing can cost you tens of thousands of dollars when you get it all straightened out. And you think, well, maybe that's not a big problem. But did you know that 1 in 6 adults binge drink 4 times a month? And in that one, quick succession, they throw back 7 drinks at a time. And it's not good for them. It's not healthy. And I'd like to say it's just a few, but did you know 1 in 3 people, they don't do it every month, but 1 in 3 people did it last month. So it's a lot of our folks that are stressed out, and 80% of it's men. Most of the binge drinking is the kids, 18 to 35. I'll tell you that. But in terms of the number of people, more than 50%, the majority are over 35. So half of us are people my age, older, that are just knocking back 5, 6, 7 drinks. And the problem is it doesn't just hurt them, which is important. It hurts all of us. It's like the tip of the iceberg that the Titanic is going to sink on. I think I looked it up. It cost our economy almost $250 billion a year because people overdrink and things like that. And most of that, 3/4 of it, comes from this binge drinking. So I pointed that out to kind of say we do judge things. We do stand up and say we're starting to focus on opiates here in Bureau County and hopefully around the country. That's the painkillers that people... I've known so many people that have gone through that, and it's deadly. So we have to be able to say that's bad fruit, that's a crime, we have to judge that way. 2 points from this before I move on to the actual... One is we all fail. We all have some sort of... And you and I know that. And the second is we cannot go it alone. The thing I love most and first about Jesus saying, judge not, because the minute we judge somebody, we say, well, you're in that boat all by yourself. You're no good. You're worthless. You're not going to amount to anything. But when we say, no, it's not my place to judge. I'm going to tell you that fruit's bad. I'm going to tell you that binge drinking is unhealthy. It's going to lead to reckless behavior, sexual problems, crime, all kinds of things. You could be a victim or a perpetrator. I'm going to get in the boat with you, though. That's the point. We're better together. The Bible says in Philippians 1:27, we stand firm in one spirit and we strive together as one for the gospel of faith. Soldiers don't fight alone. So what does it mean to judge not? It means we don't write somebody off. It means we don't reject them and say they're no good. It means we're not the judge with a gavel that slams it down and says, that's the end. I condemn you. I pronounce the sentence. You're out of here. You're going to jail. You're away from you. We don't say that. In our minds, one-on-one, we always say, you've got some problems. You got some big problems, but I've got dust in my eye too. It took our church cleaners almost 2 hours just to clean the dust off the pews. And in this is just a first swipe of the carpet, and it's cracks in every table. Every one of us has dust. I leaned up against the wall, and Katrina saw I had a white, like a skunk line, all the way down my back because the dust has settled. We're all bearing the marks of the dust, and we're not saying, you got dust, but I don't have dust. But what we're doing is we're saying, I'm going to help you dust that off, and you please help me dust it off, and we're in this together, and I'm never letting you go. And that's what Jesus means. Jesus, the one who has all the authority. Jesus, the one who decides, the judge. That's what he means when he says, you guys, don't judge. So, faith like St. Patrick. You might want to take notes on this, but I saw a great t-shirt one time that said, God invented whiskey to prevent the Irish from taking over the world. If you like history, I know Pat likes history, there's a great little series called The Hinges of History series. And it's tiny little books, so you can read them like that, but they are so incredible. And one of them is how the Irish saved civilization. 3 of my grandparents were British, family from Britain. And one is, our heritage is from Scotland. So I'm more Scottish. I'm not Irish. So I want to point out that St. Patrick was actually Scottish. And so that book I love, How the Irish Saved Civilization, St. Patrick first had to save Ireland so that Ireland could save civilization. So it's really the Scottish people that you need to be thanking for. Okay. Read the book. It's good. There's an Irish blessing that you all know that I love. The Irish, they're so blunt, and they have great sense of humor. And I think they get that from St. Patrick. The ability to look at yourself and see your own flaws, but also see someone else's at the same time. They say, Heavenly Father, may you, everyone we see love us. And those who don't, God, may you turn their hearts. And if you can't turn their hearts, Lord, turn their ankles, so we'll know by their limping that they hate us. Now, you all know St. Patrick's story. First of all, he wasn't a saint. The Catholic Church, to my knowledge, has never approved him as an official saint. But we have voted. Vox populi, vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. That's a very Congregationalist principle. And we have decided Patrick's a saint. Now, you know the story, why he's a saint. He's a young Scottish kid. His dad was a deacon. His grandfather was a priest. So he grew up in the faith in about 380 A.D. 300-something A.D. And he's walking along the shore when some Irish pirates snatch him up and march him inland and put him to work as a slave. So he's doing shepherd's work. He's doing yeoman work. And he comes to grip. He says, this faith you gave me, God, you're either going to save me or I'm going to be nothing. And his faith became so strong, and he dedicated his life to God. One night he had a dream, and in a vision, God showed him a way to escape. And he escaped, and he ran 200 miles away, and he got back to the shore, and he found a British boat, waved him down, they put him on, they got him back home. But he didn't stay in Scotland very long. He felt a calling in his heart to become a pastor, to become a priest. And he studied, and he said, and I'm going back to Ireland to bring God's love, the faith that got me through that hard time, to the people that caused me the hard time. I think we told the story of Joseph here before, right? Joseph is kidnapped by his brothers and sold into slavery. And you know how that story goes. And then at the end of the story, the tides had turned, the tables had turned. And Joseph's brothers and father come to him, he's the number 2 person in the kingdom of Egypt. And there's a famine in their land where he was, and they need food from him. And boy, he could have lowered the boom on them. But he didn't. He was kind to them. And when they asked, he said, what you did, you meant for evil, to hurt me. But God meant it for good, to save us all. And have you ever wondered how Joseph, also kidnapped and sold into slavery as a young man, had the wisdom, the patience, the love to make that decision? I don't know if you remember the story of Jacob and Esau. They were brothers. And Jacob was a conniving, I can't say things that President Trump could say in public. He was a bad fella. And somehow he finagled the blessing from his brother Esau. And he did it once, and then he did it twice. And his brother was fit to be tied because he was taking 2/3 of the inheritance, and he was taking the rights of the firstborn, which is a big deal. So he ran away to another country. And he got married. He had a couple of wives. He had 12 children. But he had a longing to go back home. But the one thing that was holding him back was he had to go through his brother because he was afraid his brother would kill him. And you know the story. He sends all of his wives and his children in little groups ahead of him across the river. He stays alone at night. And all of a sudden, an angel of God appears, and they wrestle. And Jacob says, I have seen the face of God, and I've survived. And the angel calls him Israel. You shall no longer be Jacob, but you are Israel. You are the one who wrestles with God. But then the next day, he goes across the river, and the last batch is his favorite wife and his 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin, go to his brother Esau. And his brother Esau is just shaking his head, and he's got his massive army there. He's as strong and mighty as can be. And then little Israel, Jacob, comes up, afraid his brother's going to kill him. And Esau runs out to him, reaches his arms around him, and tells him he loves him, that he's glad to see him, that he'll give him anything. And Jacob says to him the same words he said the night before. He said, I have seen in you the face of God. And I can only imagine that little Joseph is sitting up there watching in fear and terror. Is Uncle Esau going to kill my daddy? Is he going to kill us all? That's what the dad thought. Looking up and seeing Esau show grace and kindness to someone who had done nothing but treat them badly. Instead of judging him, he loved him. And I think that is probably where the seed of love was planted in Joseph that allowed Joseph to save all the Jewish civilization. The rule we learn from St. Patrick is very simple. We are called under no other circumstances, no other option. We said this at George's funeral about Dean, the same story. I don't know if you remember that. Dean, Sally's husband, hadn't seen his brother in a while. He'd been off in the Navy and, kind of a loner. And then he came back home and Elaine saw his gold Cadillac driving up and down South Main Street. And Elaine's husband would call and say, I think I see your brother-in-law in town. I said, yeah, he moved in town, but we hadn't really heard from him. Kind of shy. Well, he comes by one time and Sally gives him a big hug and puts him to work making cookies or something. And she says, now you come back and you see your brother. And he comes back kind of hesitant, getting out of the gold Cadillac, not knowing what kind of reception. And I don't know if you know Dean, but he's a big old boy. And he just reaches his arms around his brother. And he says, let's just let bygones be bygones. Let's start over from scratch. And for the next 10 years, they were the best of friends. And for the last 14 years, they had the best, closest, loving relationship. So the simple lesson from St. Patrick is we are to go to our enemies, not put up with them. I used to say this, and I was so wrong to say it. But your faith is where your faith is when you're there. I would say God said to turn the other cheek, but He never said we had to stand so close. Well, what I'm learning now is it's unfair, it's not right, but He says we have to go stand close. And like Dean, we have to hug him. And like Esau, we have to be the face of God. And like St. Patrick, we have to somehow, as best we can, dedicate our life to helping to make their life better. And St. Patrick converted the king eventually and the whole country virtually. So the next point is faith like Jesus. There is an expression, the shoe is now on the other foot. Have you ever thought about that? In the 1800s, they made boots that didn't have a left boot and a right boot. So if one boot didn't fit, you would switch your shoes around and maybe it would feel better, on the other foot. And Jesus' whole point about judging, He's not being pie in the sky. He is not being religious. He is not being, I'm better than you. It's practical. He is saying the way you judge people is how you're going to be judged. He's not asking us to be self-sacrificing. He's asking us to protect ourselves. I'm not to judge my brother, to hate my brother, to remember the sins and crimes, to punish them, all that stuff that because eventually that kind of stuff is going to come back to me. And if it doesn't happen in life, Jesus promises that that's the way that He, the judge of all of us, is going to decide things. People say, well, you're going to stand before the judge. And the way you and I are going to stand before the judge is this way. We're going to say, God, I made a lot of mistakes, but I am trusting in your grace and your blood and your power and your love to cover me. And by the way, because I received all of that forgiveness, look at my life. I wasn't perfect, but I did my best to forgive everyone else and to help everyone else as you've helped me. So that expression, shoes on the foot, the way we're measured is how we'll be measured. In John 13, Jesus says, you have to love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. He said, must. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love each other. In Matthew, when Jesus sent His disciples to cure sickness, to meet needs, to share good news, like St. Patrick, to drive out the snakes, to drive out the demons, they think that story was apocryphal. That is, there weren't really snakes in Ireland. But what he drove out, what St. Patrick drove out, just like what Jesus and His disciples drive out, and what you and I drive out, is we're like a light coming on and the cockroaches scatter. We are that bright light that we we are supposed to drive out the snakes, drive out the demons. We're supposed to be that overwhelming positive force of love and acceptance and good that fights the evil that way like water on a fire. When Jesus sent them out, he gave them this advice. He said, freely as you have received, freely you will give. Now what I love about that is the faith like Jesus, to judge not, it doesn't depend on God. He's already perfect. And He's perfect whether we judge or don't judge. It doesn't depend on the person who's doing the bad thing. They're going to do the bad thing no matter, we can't stop them, you know. We can do our best to help them, but we can't stop them. It depends only on us. How you have received. Have you received God's grace? Have you truly accepted that God loves and He's on your side? He's for you. The best two words in the Bible, over and over, when Paul talks about Jesus, the two words he uses are these two words, for you. Christ is for you. Christ died for you. Christ forgives for you. Pastor Joe Osteen likes to say also that a lot of times we try to pay God back, or we try to earn God's favor. But he said, the thing is, God has already given you everything you need to do everything He's called you to do in this life. And that's the key. If you feel overwhelmed, you're like, I can't believe that person did that to me. Now I can't do what I'm supposed to do. I can't live up to my potential. I can't get what I deserve. You need to stop and think, no, God promised He's given me everything. That person does not owe me an apology. That person does not owe me anything. Because God has given me, even if we don't see it. And here's where the faith part. Even if we don't see it, we already have everything we need to succeed. You are complete, so you don't have to compete with anyone else. So the faith like you have is you and I are building a legacy. We are planting a garden. And what I want to know is, what do you want to be known for in this life? What do you want to be known for in this life? We have all been given influence. I mean, people listen to you. You think people don't listen to you? People listen to you. You make an impact. But the impact and influence God gives us is so we can inspire people not to be vindictive. There is no joy in revenge. The Bible says that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. He says that a lot. Because there's truly no satisfaction in getting even. Yes, they did something wrong to us, like St. Patrick. But the real test is how we treat people, not how they treat us. And it's the test when we have the advantage and the opportunity to put the shoe on the other foot. Do we step on them like they stepped on us? I don't know if you noticed this week the power lines, the power in Princeton went out. Did you know that? And I guess you read in the paper the explanation over at Ace Road, and then again an hour later at Backbone Road near Pat's office. And he gave the long explanation, but basically the power lines we had, they were doing some testing and flipping things on. Our power lines couldn't handle the current. And they blew some, he said what it was, and it caught on fire. It blew it up. That is exactly what Jesus is talking about. The faith He has given you, He wants to test you to know if you are strong enough to hold the juice, the current, the power, the electricity, His power that He wants to pour in you. His power has all the power. There's an expression that says, Jesus says, I am meek and lowly. Meek does not mean weak. Meek means you have the power, but you restrain yourself from squashing that bug, from putting the small person down, for lowering the hammer, for jacking them up. I don't know if people say that, but I say that. Yes, what they did was wrong, but God is testing you to find out, before He puts His power in you, if you can handle that much real authority. Jesus says all authority in heaven is given to Him. He also says all authority on earth is given to Him. And He also says He's going to share that authority now and throughout all eternity with you and me. We are going to help Jesus rule the world. The question He wants to know is, how much of His power can you really hold? You know, if you get a little power and you're going to, oh, I got this list of people I'm going to pay back, He's going to be hesitant to give us that power. My mom sent my brother and my sister and me a text message yesterday, and she said the best movie I have ever seen is this new movie called Mercy, called I Can Only Imagine. Have you seen that? Heard that? I Can Only Imagine is there's a Christian group called Mercy Me, and it's a big old boy. He's a singer. You know, I don't know why I don't think of big guys as singers. You know, he looks like a rough fella. Turns out he came from a rough background. His dad was a horrible, horrible person, a monster, he says, who came to Christ. And one day, and this movie is the story of him writing this song, which is like sold millions of copies around the world. And he wrote this song called If You Could Only Imagine. And their group is, so you got to see this movie. Dennis Quaid is in it. My mom said it's great, but you got to take tissue. She said it's going to make you cry and cry and cry. And in that, I had a point for that. I can't remember what the point was. Man, it's bad when you can see your notes and you still can't even figure out what you're going to say. You know, that's interesting. Mercy Me is a Christian group. But if you've ever heard that song, I Can Only Imagine, it's a top 40. That means secular. And I heard an interview with him. He said, somebody asked, how did you get to be a top 40? You're clearly talking about, I can only imagine being with God and what it's going to be like in heaven with all these people that are, you know, the problems are fixed. And he said, well, there was this little station, I think in Dallas or Houston, that was playing top 40 songs. And the callers came in and dared the DJ, I dare you to play this Christian song. And they said, nah, I'm not going to play a Christian song. This is rock and roll, pop music. And people started calling in, I dare you. And so they finally played it. And once they played it, it took off like wildfire all across the country in the secular radio world. And it became a top 40 hit. And now they have a movie. So please go see that. When you act like God, instead of acting like the people who have abandoned and hurt and disappointed and cheated and lied to you, whatever. When you show mercy, when we show mercy and grace, we are showing that we are not the old wineskins that are going to crack when you pour that new wine in it, and as it ferments and becomes something exciting and powerful. We're not going to explode like those power transformers. We're not the old fabric that's going to tear away when He puts a new patch on us. And I'll close with this one thought. The truth of the faith that you have to judge not. And it's going to take faith to not judge. You know, I've been through some things where people who have said bad things about me. And the inclination is to say, well, let me explain my side, you know. But if it is wrong for them to say bad things about us, why is it okay, for whatever reason, for us to say bad things about them? If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And Jesus said, it's your choice. However you judge, however you measure, however you forgive, that's the standard that I'm going to use for you. The truth is, people cannot undo the wrongs they have done to you. They just can't. I'm sorry. But God can. God can repay everything they've taken away. We have a beautiful hymn given the St. Patrick's Day. You only get to wear the green jacket a couple of times a year, so I'm not going to be in the Masters. It's never going to happen, so this is my only shot. We have a wonderful tune. It's an insert in your bulletin. It is a hymn set to the tune of Danny Boy called I Cannot Tell. Would you please rise and join in singing this hymn?
Just as his
receive this blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with his favor and give you his peace. Amen.